Felicia White loved her husband. Felicia was a beautiful woman who, despite her looks, had a shy personality and low self-esteem. She had few friends, and spent most of her time at home. Her husband worked during the day, but Felicia did not have a job. Her daily routine remained consistent for years. Every day Felicia would wake up and make breakfast before her husband, Matthew, woke up. Most days she would have already had eggs and bacon done and be in the middle of pulling the toast from the toaster when Matthew walked into the kitchen, hair still wet from a shower he took after he woke up. He always liked her breakfasts, but if Felicia didn't have breakfast ready, then Matthew would have to punish her. Most days Felicia was fortunate enough to escape his punishment. After breakfast, Matthew would head out the door to go to work. Felicia would sigh in relief when she heard the car door slam and the engine start up before the small gray car set off down the road. Upon knowing he was gone, she would sit on the couch in front of the TV for a little time. It didn't last long, but she treasured every moment. Felicia would then get on Facebook to connect with her friends. She messaged them back and forth. Sometimes they would ask her if she wanted to get together and do something, but Felicia's answer was always the same. "I need to ask Matt first." Felicia had hours of free time before Matthew came home from work, but at a certain time she had to stop and begin making dinner. The more extravagant the meal, the happier Matt would be. She had a few cookbooks, and tried to make just enough for there not to be leftovers. Matt didn't like leftovers. One day, Felicia was in the middle of a long, deep conversation on Facebook with one of her friends when the sound of a car door slamming outside made her jump in surprise. Matthew came into the house, and immediately noticed that the smell of food cooking was absent. "Felicia!" he roared. Felicia tore herself away from the computer and hurried over to him. "What's for dinner?" "Oh, I'm sorry honey, but dinner is going to take a little bit longer." Felicia hadn't even started making anything to eat, but she knew a few recipes that could be finished in a short amount of time. For now, she begged that Matt wouldn't want to go into the kitchen. He did. Matthew pushed past Felicia and went into the kitchen. The dishes weren't done. There was no food in the oven or in the microwave. He turned to Felicia, who could see his face growing red. "Where's dinner?" he said in a menacing tone, moving closer to Felicia. Felicia started to step away from her husband. "I've been talking to Michelle, we." Felicia didn't get a chance to finish her sentence. Matthew's hand flew out and slapped her across the cheek. Felicia cried out in pain while her hand flew up to her stinging red cheek. Matt reached up and his fingers seized Felicia's long brown hair. Felicia began to squeal in pain as Matt dragged her out of the kitchen and to the computer. "You've been spending the entire day sitting on your ass with Michelle," his eyes flew across the screen. "Talking about recipes." Felicia didn't get the chance to explain. Matthew pushed her to the ground and kicked her in the side 3 times. Felicia couldn't breathe, and began coughing and choking while she lay on the floor. Matthew was cursing under his breath as he stomped back to the kitchen. He had apparently decided to have leftovers. From that day on, Felicia began to obsess over making her husband happy. She had begun to shun Facebook since the punishment she had gotten from Matt, and whenever she did get online she wasn't on for long. She slaved over the dinner every day, and had it ready long before her husband got home. She did the dishes, dusted, and vacuumed every day. Felicia's friends began to say that she was becoming distant, and some asked if she was all right. Felicia's answer was always the same, that she was just fine. Her friends' worries had been justified. Felicia's beautiful looks had begun to wither away, leaving a skinny, pale shell behind. Felicia didn't care, her only concern was Matthew. And her life remained the same, until one day. It started off a typical day. It was bright and sunny outside, and there were groups of kids playing outside even though the weather forecast had said there would be rain later. As Matthew left for work after a large breakfast supplied by Felicia, the first grey clouds began to move in the sky. The sky was still blue behind the grey storm clouds, as it was behind all clouds. Felicia was thin at this point. She was easily comparable to an anorexic person, and very frail. Still, she slaved over making the house perfect so Matt would be happy. She had avoided a punishment for months, the last one being when she hadn't made dinner. Felicia had 2 hours before Matthew was supposed to come home. For the time being, she was vacuuming. Matthew wouldn't want to come home to a messy carpet, now would he? Suddenly Felicia noticed a tiny speck of dirt by the wall. She ran the vacuum over it. It still hadn't moved. Felicia's head began to hurt. She ran the vacuum over it again. The speck remained there, mocking her. Felicia tried again, and failed. Her head began to pound. The speck remained there. Felicia entered a trance-like state. She couldn't see anything except for the speck, and knew nothing else mattered but getting rid of it. She ran the vacuum over the speck over and over again, and tried everything to get rid of it. She tried to pull it off with her own hands, but her fingers couldn't manage to get it. Finally the speck was sucked into the vacuum, and her trance was over. Satisfied, Felicia walked to the kitchen to make Matthew's dinner. Felicia was trying out a new recipe, and was confident it was going to be a great success. She filled a pot with water and put it on the stove. A car door slammed outside. Felicia jumped, and her eyes flew to the clock. He wasn't early, Matthew always got home around this time. She had been vacuuming for 2 hours, trying to get rid of the dirt speck. A helpless, terrified feeling exploded inside her. She frantically ran around, trying to persuade the water to boil faster so she could put the noodles inside and make the sauce end. "I'm home." Matthew's familiar call rang out as the front door opened and closed. Matthew went into the kitchen where he knew Felicia would be waiting. He was greeted with the sight of his wife standing next to a pot of water, no dinner made. Matthew's eyes narrowed, and he began to feel angry. You didn't make dinner, did you?" His voice slowly rose up higher, reaching the sounds of fury. Felicia's heart stopped. Matthew threw himself at his wife, fists pounding every inch of her that he could reach. A hit in the eye, a hit in the stomach, a hit in the nose, a hit in the throat, a hit in the back of the head. Matt was relentless. Felicia cried out with every hit, and rose her hands in a feeble attempt of defense. Matthew was outraged to see this small hint of rebellion, and grabbed her by one of her wrists. Matt dragged her over to the boiling water, and pushed her head into it. Felicia grabbed the sides of the pot, and her hands began to blister from the heated metal. Matt knocked the pot of boiling water at Felicia and she screamed as the heat washed over her. It felt like molten lava, and it got inside the fabric of her clothes. Every part of her body was burning. She kept screaming as her knees gave way, making her fall into the puddle of lava on the floor next to the overturned pot. Matthew released his grip from Felicia's wrist, and for a moment she dared to think the punishment was over. Then Matthew grabbed her by the hair, and pulled her up onto her feet. Matthew let out a scream of fury that Felicia would remember. She heard something in that cry, but didn't want to think about what else was in that cry. Only later would she look back and realize what she heard was hatred. Matthew pushed her forward, and for a moment Felicia thought he was shoving her to the ground again, but then she saw the stove. She had left the water boiling with a small flame underneath it. Her face was headed toward the same fire. She put her hands up and grabbed onto the side of the stove, tried to fight against Matthew. Her face wasn't going to go in there, her face wasn't going to be burned. Matthew's grip loosened, and then he shoved her into the fire with all his strength. Felicia cried out in terror before her face went into the flame. Felicia's screams morphed into terrible agony. She wailed as she suffered. The fire burned her eyelids when she tried to close them. Matthew pushed, and then her hair was on fire. It burned into her scalp and left large, ugly marks. Matthew roughly pulled her by what was left of her hair away from the fire. Unfortunately, he pulled hard enough that the last of her hair came out in his hand. The smell of burned flesh lingered in the air. Felicia began to black out. The last thing she saw was Matthew, coming out of his sudden rage and looking extremely frightened by what he had just done. Then the darkness came and took Felicia away. Felicia woke up a few days later. She wasn't aware she was awake until voices rang out in the room. "Be okay, doctor." "Hush, Mr. White, she's waking up." "Felicia, dear. She's just been through a traumatic experience, we'll need to test her mental stability." "What is your name?" There was a pause. "Is your name Felicia White?" Felicia nodded her head. "Why isn't she saying anything?" "Felicia, you cannot see anything because we had to wrap your head in bandages. Your husband brought you here. We attempted facial burn reconstruction surgery, but it is still fragile, so the bandages need to stay on for a little while longer. Are you all right? Can I get you anything?" Felicia shook her head. "Felicia? Felicia, why aren't you talking?" "Mr. White, she has just been through a traumatic experience." "How did you say she got those burns again?" "Oh, she was cooking dinner and fell over onto the fire. I found her unconscious and put out the fire before calling an ambulance." "She just fell over? Fainted?" "Yes." "Well, she's very lucky then, Mr. White. You might have saved her life." "Yeah. I did." The next day, Felicia's doctor told her that it was time to take off the bandages wrapped around her head. They took them off, and Felicia was blinded by the harsh lights of the hospital after being in the darkness for so long. The doctor held up a mirror, and Felicia saw her new face. It was almost completely unlike her real one. This face wasn't beautiful in the slightest. Her eyes were too wide due to lack of eyelids, her lips seemed too big, and she didn't have any hair. Her previous good looks had abandoned her, or been taken in the fire. They were taken by. "How does it look?" the doctor asked her. Felicia got a look at him for the first time, and saw he seemed like a young, fresh, new doctor. Felicia did not speak. Her lips did not curve up or down in a smile or frown. Her eyes darted across the room, and stopped on Matthew, who shifted uncomfortably. "You still look beautiful, dear," he tried to say with a smile, but Felicia heard the repulsion in his voice. Matt was disgusted by her. "There's still a little bit of paperwork left, and then you can go home," the doctor said, successfully pulling off a smile. His voice was light and sympathetic. Felicia nodded again, and moved to get out of bed. She was dressed in a standard hospital gown, and the doctor left to allow her some privacy. Matthew stayed the room and watched his wife undress and redress in more suitable clothes. He didn't say anything, Felicia wasn't expecting him to. After she had dressed in a pale grey dress, she walked over to the door. Matthew got there first, and opened it for her. Felicia knew it was just his way of trying to apologize for what he had taken from her. She walked out of the room and into the dimly lit hospital hall. There was a woman in a wheelchair outside the room who suddenly erupted in a coughing fit as Felicia walked past. Matthew stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him. That night, Matthew lay in bed awaiting Felicia, who was in the bathroom looking at her new face. It rather resembled a doll. Like Barbie, Felicia thought. She reached in the drawer, and got out some makeup. She added blush to her cheeks, lipstick to her lips, and mascara to her eyes. Soon, she was covered in makeup. A living doll, with real blood in her veins. "Felicia!" Matthew hesitantly called out. "Are you all right?" He watched the bathroom. No movement. Matthew rolled over and tried to get comfortable, trying not to think about what would be sleeping next to him. Unable to get comfortable, he rolled over again. "Jesus Christ!" he yelled out. Felicia was standing silently next to the wall. Matthew didn't see her go there. After taking a few deep breaths, he angrily spoke to her. "Damn it, Felicia. I almost had a heart attack. You." His words were caught in his throat when Felicia made a sudden movement and pain exploded up his arm. He looked at where the pain was, and screamed. Blood was oozing out of his arm. Felicia held a chef knife in her hand, probably taken from the kitchen. Blood stained the blade, and dripped off slowly. Felicia stood there completely still. Matthew noticed that with the surgery, she resembled a giant doll. Her clothes seemed made for a small plastic figure, and her face was just as lively as a doll's. The only difference was that dolls had hair. "You like people to hurt," Felicia said in a chilling voice. Somehow, she spoke without moving her lips the slightest bit. "You like to hurt? Felicia, please, no. I want you to be happy, honey," Felicia whispered. "That's all I've ever wanted." Her voice was neither joyous or mad, angry or sad. Matthew could hear no coldness or anything in Felicia's stiff condescending voice. How was she able to talk without moving any part of her new face? "I'm going to make you happy," Felicia said quietly. She cleanly swung the knife into Matthew's chest. The man howled, and fell off the side of the bed onto the floor. He tried to crawl past Felicia, but failed. Felicia stabbed the knife down, and hit him in the spine. She made sure to twist the knife before roughly pulling it out. "You're going to be so happy. Felicia, please, no. Felicia. Felicia, no, no, no." The knife entered Matthew's head. Felicia neatly pulled the knife out and splattered his brains all over. Matthew's corpse fell onto the floor at Felicia's feet. She looked down at what used to be her husband. "Don't worry, honey," Felicia crooned, "I'll make you happy. I'll make them all hurt. I'll make everybody hurt." Felicia stepped over Matthew, walked out of the room, and left the house into the darkness of the night. Matthew White was the first of the doll face murders. Witnesses reported seeing an unknown doll-like figure leaving the house before White's corpse was found. His wife Felicia's whereabouts are unknown. The unknown doll-like figure has been reported in various other murders across the country. Evidence indicates the victims were tortured before finally killed. One witness described the murderer as like a giant Barbie doll without hair. Her face didn't move at all throughout the entire thing, almost like it was a mask, but it just wasn't. It wasn't a mask. Other victims of domestic abuse has called her a blessing from heaven. Some victims of abuse have become doll face. If you have any information regarding the victim known as doll face, then you have done something very wrong. End domestic violence now. Stay paranoid, my friends.